Me. Good evening, good evening. Give me just a second, please. All righty. Good evening. Welcome on this day. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Act of 2024, this meeting of the Traffic Commission will be conducted via remote participation. We will post an audio video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive records of these proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the City of Somerville website. All right. Can we get a roll call for a quorum, please?
Yes. Chair Lathan,
Yes.
Lena Webb,
Yes.
Lieutenant Reimel,
Here, yes.
and Councillor Said.
Present.
And that's 4 in attendance, and we have 1 absent.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, meeting ground rules. Listen to the other side, please. Focus on issues, not personalities. Avoid questioning motives, and let's be polite. Item number 1, acceptance of the minutes from the April 11th, 2024 Traffic Commission meeting. Can I get a motion to accept or deny? Item number 1, please.
Motion
Motion to accept.
second.
Wonderful. Can I get a roll call vote to accept item number 1, please?
Yes. Chair Lathan,
Yes.
Councillor Said,
Yes.
Lena Webb,
Yes.
Lieutenant Reimel,
Yes.
and that's 4 yes, and the motion carries.
All righty. Item number 2, request for a fire lane on Laurel Street running from the corner of Green Street down the odd side in a southerly direction for a distance of 20 feet. Who is here to discuss this item?
I
Nada?
can just show on the screen the letter that Chief Breen from the fire department submitted to the commission requesting this fire lane. And he sent the attached photo, which shows the 20 feet that the fire truck needs to make the turn. So where this car is parked,
Definitely.
they cannot make the turn.
Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, can I get a motion to accept or deny item number 2?
Motion to accept.
Can I get a second, Ms. Webb?
Seconded, yes.
Can I get a roll call vote to accept item number 2, request for a fire lane on Lowell Street running from the corner of Green Street down the odd side in the southerly direction for a distance of 20 feet?
Yes. Chair Lathan,
Yes.
Councillor Said,
Yes.
Lena Webb,
Yes.
Lieutenant Reimel,
Yes.
and that's 4 yes, and the motion carries.
Wonderful. On to item number 3. Request to remove one resident permit parking space at 42 Liberty Ave for a sidewalk bump out in front of the tree to make the sidewalk ADA compliant. Is there anyone here to address this issue?
That's me, Rebecca Wright, City of Somerville Engineering. I requested to put this item on the agenda under our current fiscal year streetscapes contract. We are replacing the sidewalk and curb-to-curb paving on Liberty. During the walkthrough with the contractor, it was discovered that this area was not compliant. Is it okay if I share my screen? I did put some, okay. Okay, can you guys see my presentation? All right, cool. I've never really done it on, it's been a while. All right, so the area in question is 42 Liberty, removing one parking space to make the sidewalk ADA compliant. This is a field measurement. As you can see, it is 30 inches from the tree trunk to presumably the back of sidewalk property line. We need minimum 36 inches to make the sidewalk compliant for ADA. And normally we replace flexi pave, but even with that, it's the trunk is way too high to get that extra 6 inches that we need. So the proposition is to, in order to save the tree and make the area compliant, install a sidewalk bump out. So it's new curbing and concrete, about 4 feet or 5.5 feet, which will take away 1 parking space to accommodate this request. And that's the last of my slide. I'm not sure if anyone has any questions.
I have a question. So if this gets approved and moves forward, just want to make sure that everyone's going to be on the same page about protecting the tree roots.
During construction.
Yes.
Yeah, so we are intentionally leaving the granite curbing in front of the actual tree in place and removing the adjacent curbing, which is normal construction procedure with this contract. So the curb directly in front of the tree pit will remain in place.
So it's very clear to the contractors that as they're working with this curb, leaving it in front, but working on the other side of the tree, that they'll be either hand jacking that curb, correct?
Yeah. We have air spading in this contract, and they will either do that or use their regular equipment and be careful around any roots.
And in that contract, they'll be aware of any damage to the tree, they will be assessed a fine?
Yes, there's penalties in the contract for tree damage.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions from the committee? None? Can I get a motion to accept or deny item number 3, please?
I'll make a motion to accept.
Can I get a second?
I second.
Wonderful. Can I get a roll call vote to accept item number 3?
Yes. Chair Lathan,
Yes.
Counselor Said,
Yes.
Lena Webb,
Yes.
Lieutenant Rymel,
Yes.
and that's 4 yes, and the motion carries.
Wonderful. On to item number 4. Regarding the curb on the north side of Somerville Ave from 115 feet to 150 feet west of Breach Street and nearest 577 Somerville Ave, request to convert 35 feet of 2-hour parking except by permit to a loading zone at all times. Who is here to discuss this item?
Good evening, Chair. My name is Adam Polinsky from the city's mobility division, and I can represent this item. I will also share my screen if that's all right. Okay, so the item in question here, or the location in question, is 577 Somerville Ave. The context here is that the current business tenant in that building, Vittoria Meat Market, came to the city and requested the creation of a loading zone to better suit their operations. This was reviewed in the field against other existing regulations in the area, against other things like driveway locations, how much room we had between mobility and parking. And we determined that this was a reasonable request, that the appropriate regulation was to take the 2-hour parking that's currently out there and make it a full-time loading zone, and proceed with taking the 35-foot section of curb here in front of this building as they requested, and changing the regulation.
So I have a question. So 24-hour loading zone, so people are going to be loading in the middle of the night? unloading and loading in the middle of the night? Is there any sort of issues with that? I mean, is that pretty common across the city that we have 24-hour loading zones?
So it is not, and I will let parking chime in if they feel like I miss anything on this, but I'll take a quick stab at it. Generally speaking, the simpler we can make our regulations, the more likely it is that people will listen to them. So if it is an area, and Somerville Ave is an area where generally we don't have a lot of demand for overnight residential permit parking, we do try to have as few regulations as possible to simplify the signage that we use and to make it more likely that people are going to obey it. People are also not always great about leaving when they do park overnight and making the loading zone clear in the morning. And so if the demand isn't really there to have overnight parking, then we do try to gravitate towards having a full-time loading zone. So even if it's not necessarily being used at midnight, it does encourage better operations for when it does need to be used.
This is right across from the ice rink, correct?
Correct.
So if a business, I'm just for my own understanding, if a business wanted to use their zone to do this loading in the middle of the night or 2, 3, in the morning, there's no sort of issues that we're gonna have with noise or complaints or how do we handle that typically? Besides a complaint that would come in through 311, do you know?
I would say that otherwise this would typically be happening. They'd be finding another way to, I guess it depends on the business, right? Like, I don't think this business is necessarily saying that they want to be doing loading operations overnight. So I don't anticipate that being a problem. If it does become one, we can always make adjustments to the regulations. But if, say for instance, it's the ice rink that needs it, I would imagine they would still continue to use the parking lot for the ice rink as it's more convenient for them, more convenient than this current space. But yeah, it's an adjustment that can always be made if we do have issues. We do have this regulation in other places around the city. So we haven't seen issues so far, to the best of my knowledge. Again, I'll let parking chime in, who's usually closer to the ground on this stuff than I am, if they feel otherwise. But I think the idea is that it's less about saying people are going to be parking overnight and doing loading overnight, and more to make sure that it's clear during the daytime hours when it is more likely that those spaces are utilized for those operations.
So if somehow this becomes a problem, the business gets sold and something else gets placed there, and there's some overnight activity that would be problematic for the neighbors, we would revisit this?
Yeah, I imagine we'd just come back to the commission. We'd do another review and would come back to the commission and request a change to residential permit parking overnight, or, go back to the 2-hour parking regulation to match existing, something that makes sense for the neighborhood based on any change in use.
Director Redfern, I know, Councilor Seat, you have your hand up. Director Redfern, did you want to pipe in?
Nope, I think Adam explained it
Okay.
quite well. I'm just here in case somebody had a question.
Okay. Councilor Seat?
Thank you, Chair Lathan. My question is, do I have data showing that there's no high need for overnight parking?
No, we have not done, at least Mobility has not done any studies explicitly regarding this location. This was done at the request of the neighbors, of the business. And a lot of that is just sort of based on, anecdotal evidence from city staff. So we have not done any formal parking counts or anything like that, to the best of my knowledge. I think it's more about the land uses in the area, given that it's primarily a commercial corridor.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just hesitant to approve something loading zone for 24 hours, knowing there is no need for 24-hour loading zone when we don't have data showing that these spots are being used overnight. Is this 2 parking spots?
Yeah, correct.
Or more
It's
than that?
yeah. It's
2.
about it would fit about 2 sedans or one bigger truck.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the reasoning. I think this is not the first time we have this type of explanation where it just makes it easier. But I think that's where enforcement comes in. So that's my only concern, is that we don't actually have data showing that people are not parking there overnight.
Sure.
Thank you.
Lena?
Yeah, through you to the committee, it's obviously, this is not like a parking study or anything, but it's anecdotal. I'm frequently, having to go to Aeronaut Brewery for advocacy events, that happen at night. And I bike up and down Somerville Ave to get to Aeronaut, and I can say that there are big trucks that park outside of that place because they block that painted bike lane. And so I have to enter traffic in the dark, which is not great. And I think I understand why keeping it simple would increase compliance. And also, you know, we don't necessarily know if people who are parking there overnight are doing it legally. And I would also just tend to trust the business to know their needs on this one. So I support it.
Any further discussion?
Chair Lathan, I will just add that passenger plates can also use this spot for up to 5 minutes. So if they're dropping off a resident, maybe it be Uber or Lyft or any sort of, taxi, this will give a clear space for somebody to also drop off folks. So that can also be used in that space. It's not just for delivery trucks. A passenger plate will have 5 minutes. Delivery trucks will have up to 20.
Oh. Good to know. I did not know that. Any further discussion? Hearing none, can I get a motion to either accept or deny item number 4, please?
I'll make a motion to accept.
Can I get a second, Lieutenant Raimel?
I'll second that. Yep.
Can I get a roll call vote to accept item number 4?
Yes, Chair Lathan,
Yes.
Counselor Said,
No.
Lena Webb,
Yes.
Lieutenant Raimel.
No.
So that's 2 yes and 2 no. So if it's tied, then the motion does not carry to approve this loading zone.
All right, moving on to item number 5. Glen Street and Otis Street mobility improvements. Curb regulations A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. Adam, are you talking about this one as well?
Me again.
Alrighty, you're up.
All right. This one is a little bit more complex than the last one, so bear with me. I don't think most of the commission members that are currently sitting have gone through a two-way traffic change request. So I want to explain to you guys a little bit about this project and what the intended design is for Glen Street and Otis Street before we get into the actual items. So I'd sent some materials to the commission on Monday. Hopefully everyone at least had a chance to kind of look through the initial slide deck. I did send some supporting materials as well. I won't spend a bunch of time going through all of that, but there is a whole slide deck on this project. All of the players in terms of who's been working on it. So it's very much a collaboration between the city of Somerville, Culture House, and Neighborways Design. Not to be confused with what we are calling a neighborway. So there is a design treatment that's called a neighborway street. There is also a company that we've been working with called Neighborways Design. And we've all been working together using ARPA funds to produce this Neighborways project on the full length of Glen Street and then Otis Street from McGrath Highway to Glen Street. In the form of neighborways, and I'll get into what that is in a minute. Glen and Otis are both designated as priority projects in the city's bike network plan. And so these have been, they were an important selection in terms of what projects the Culture House and Neighborways team wanted to move forward with. And they have been developed with community input throughout the process. And again, if everyone wants to look at sort of like how the project came to be and all the work that's been put into these designs and to working with community members to develop it, there is a link at the bottom of the page here, and then you can also see the full construction plans as well, but I'll kind of go through the highlights of those on the next few slides as we're going through the actual items for approval. On the right here, it is an example of what the final product is going to look like from Street View. But to take a quick step back, Glen and Otis are the streets that we're planning on tackling, and the product is a neighborway. What is a neighborway though? So a neighborway is a street, typically residential in Somerville, where traffic volumes and speeds are both low enough that people can safely bike in the middle of the road, whether it's with traffic or against it. And walking on the sidewalk is generally pretty comfortable because there's not a lot of traffic and it's pretty slow. These streets are generally two-way for people on bikes. Sometimes the street is also two-way for cars. Sometimes it is one-way for cars. And so in that case, you do have a treatment here like we've developed on Hancock Street. So here's an example of an existing neighborhood in Somerville. These streets typically don't have dedicated bike lanes like you see on some of our busier roads where there's just so much traffic that people on bikes have to have their own facility. They just have these little gateway treatments, as we call them, at intersections where there's the highest amount of potential for conflict, so that a car and a bike kind of have their own space to navigate and can get out of each other's way before kind of merging back into the single travel lane. We do have existing neighborways, as I just mentioned. Here's an example at Hancock and Elm. We also have neighborways on Gilman Street and Oliver Street in East Somerville. So this project is intended to expand the neighborways network in East Somerville. And in fact, we felt that the Gilman and Oliver neighborways were so successful based on the sort of paint treatment that we had done a few years ago, kind of like you see here on Hancock, that we upgraded them. And so there's now a fully constructed raised intersection at Gilman and Cross, where Gilman and Oliver meet Cross Street. There's a neighborhood traffic circle further down on Oliver, and we're in the process of finishing up some construction on Gilman at Walnut. So we're kind of starting to take the next step towards building out this neighborways network, and we have a bunch more of these planned through our bike network plan. Glen and Otis are kind of the first new streets that we're planning to build out neighborways on since we adopted the bike network plan. And if anyone's interested in learning a little bit more about contraflow biking, as we call it, so when a bike is going against the flow of traffic on a one-way street, there is an analysis and research project that was done at this link that kind of summarizes a bunch of findings out of Tufts, and it does include some information about Hancock Street. They actually studied our street. So with that as sort of the preamble, I will get into the various items that we have discussed or that are on the agenda for today. So we will start over on Otis Street. So this is Otis Street at McGrath Highway. The item is for an additional 10 feet of no parking beyond our sort of standard 20-foot parking regulation that already exists within 20 feet of all crosswalks or intersections within the city, extending that by an additional 10 feet of no parking so that we can produce the design as you see it on the right. So this would be the similar treatment to as I was showing on Hancock, where you have a little entryway for a bike, a car has enough room to get around here, and then once traffic has cleared, the bike can continue if there happens to be a car coming. If not, they can kind of use this and take up the street. And then there will be opportunities throughout these streets for people to pull over because we tend to have so many driveways in Somerville that there's a sort of negotiation that happens. But in order to produce this important gateway treatment here, we are requesting the removal of 10 feet of residential permit parking. It's going to be a similar story as we work our way down Otis. So this is at Cross Street here. The existing condition is shown here on the left. again, in addition to the standard sort of 20 feet no parking zone that we have not yet marked out, but does exist in our regulations across the city, we're requesting an additional 20 feet of no parking on the south side of Otis that is currently residential permit parking. And then pending approval there, this would be the final design in this section. So bikes are, since Otis is a one-way westbound, bikes would have a dedicated lane for about 40 feet coming into the intersection here, and cars would be coming from Cross Street at all times. We now move to Glen. This is Glen Street, sort of going up and down on your screen, and that's Broadway going left to right at the top of the page. The request here is for an
Yeah,
additional.
real
Oh,
quick.
yep.
Can you just, when you're going to the next item, since they're labeled AB, can you just reference? the
Yes.
letter?
Yes,
So we-
sure. So
we
yeah,
discussed
so
A and B.
yep. So I just discussed A and B on Otis. We're now on item 5C.
Okay.
So this is Glen Street at Broadway. Would it be helpful for me to read out the full request as well, or just mention the name?
No, just to
Okay,
identify. the
Just
item.
5C. Okay, sounds good. So 5C, this is at the top of Glen Street, the northernmost section of Glen. There is some metered parking here, so we would be requesting the removal of this meter here to provide our exit treatment for someone contraflow coming out of Glen Street. Now we work all the way down to Pearl Street. The request here is, in addition to our 20-foot standard no parking zones, request for 10 feet of no parking on the northeast corner of Glen here, and then an additional 10 feet on northwest corner, yeah, and then southeast corner on this side of Glen at Pearl. And you can see the final design proposal here. Those are items 5D and 5E, sorry. Okay, moving on to 5F and 5G. Those both correspond to the Glen Street at Oliver Street intersection. The request is to take the existing residential permit parking on the northwest side of Glen here, north of Oliver, to be able to provide the contraflow bike lane here. And then on the southeast side, this is 10 feet of what is currently a pickup and drop-off area during school hours, and then residential permit parking at all other times. This does only amount to about half a space and is often used flexibly. So it's not really even a full parking space in that case. And so the idea there is that we will then be able to provide some additional space for the treatments on Glen at Oliver. And then the last curb regulation, item 5H request is at Glen and Tufts, all the way at the southern end of Glen. And that request is for an additional 20 feet of no parking on top of the standard 20-foot no parking zone, so that we can produce a bike exit lane onto Tufts Street. And then lastly, we are also requesting not just the curb regulation changes, but the traffic regulation changes to accommodate these contraflow biking facilities. And so item 5I is the request to allow two-way travel for people riding bicycles on Glen Street between Tufts Street and Broadway. And item 5J is the request to allow two-way travel for people riding bicycles on Otis Street between McGrath Highway and Cross Street. So that is my presentation on the Glen Street and Otis Street project and our subsequent curb and traffic regulation changes, and can take any questions if there are any at this time.
Questions from the committee, discussion?
I have my hand up.
Great.
I'm generally supportive of contraflow bike lanes, especially when they are around corridors like McGrath Highway. You know, those are, you don't want to be biking on McGrath. And so you're going to be looking for those little side streets to kind of worm your way, maze your way through Somerville so that you're not biking on McGrath. I don't think anyone wants to bike on McGrath. And so being able to allow that flexibility with, you know, the two ways, because a lot of those streets, because it's McGrath, they point out onto McGrath because they don't want McGrath traffic being able to go into the neighborhoods. And so I support that, especially around a place like McGrath. I will say that one thing I do not like about contraflow bike lanes, and I wonder if it can be addressed here, that isn't on Hancock, is some sort of sign or some sort of reminder that this is a contraflow bike lane in the middle of the street. Because what we have right now is a nice clear entry and a nice clear exit. But, you know, in the middle, when a car is coming down and there is no real sign that, you know, and so is that a purple super Sharrow is what I, a purple
Yeah,
202
essentially the design we've chosen is a little bit different than a standard Sharrow. It's
Okay.
intended to be a woman on a bike
Nice.
and a purple background to kind of highlight something different than the standard Sharrow.
Okay.
And it would be two-way to just kind of indicate that, like, hey, this is a different kind of street. It will have the signs as well. And we could, if we felt like more signage was necessary, we could always put more on the middle. I don't think there's a ton planned now because we're very cognizant of sign clutter as well, but we think the pavement markings every couple 100 feet would start to get across some of what you're
Okay,
saying.
that was my second one. Is it not just the one, but
Yeah.
there's like,
Yeah,
if
it's
there's a certain
every,
amount of feet, there will be one every X whatever.
yeah, by the time you get to
Okay.
one, you should be able to see the next one up the street. So
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Can I get a motion to accept or deny? Item number 5, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, and J. Counselor
I'll make a
Said?
motion.
Oh, great.
I second.
Could
Oh,
we just
I
get
did
a verbal
Motion to
confirmation?
accept, yeah.
Accept,
A verbal
accept.
confirmation on what type of motion?
Yes, move to accept.
All right, Counselor Said?
I second.
Can I get a roll call vote to accept item number 5, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, and J, please?
Yes. Chair Lathan,
Yes.
Counselor Said,
Yes.
Lena Webb,
Yes.
Lieutenant Rymel,
I was muted. Yes, sorry. Yes.
and that's 4 yes, and the motion carries.
Wonderful. I just want to thank Mobility for their creativity and always being very, forward look as far as making changes and how you're advertising those changes and looking for creative ways to grab folks' attention. So hats off to you, Adam. Move
Thank you,
on
Chair.
to item number 6, Florence Street curb use changes, A and B. Are you speaking on this item as well, Adam?
I am. One more for me. All right. So item number 6 is as follows. So this is in regards to Florence Street at the very southern end, right as you're approaching Washington Street. As you can see in the label here, this is Washington going left to right. We're down by, there's a car wash on the left. There is 4 Florence Street is the residential building on the right. And then actually the genesis of this request was from United Divers. Since the implementation of a bus lane on the in the eastbound direction of Washington Street, there has been some parking removal on that corridor. And we were talking to the owner, my colleague Justin was a couple weeks ago, and they were requesting some changes on Florence to better accommodate some of their customers' needs. Right now, there is mostly residential in this area, except on a couple of short stretches of Washington Street. And so they were asking if accommodations could be made to better serve their customer base. Given that this is something, this project was rolled out a few years ago, but these days, as you all are pretty aware when we do make more substantial changes, especially when it comes to parking on some of our main corridors, we do also look at the side streets. And so we felt that it was a reasonable request from this business owner. And so we come to the commission today, after these changes were all made to request some just changes of the regulations on Florence. So it's currently residential permit parking on both sides, and we would request that the last 20 feet before the driveway on that would be the east side, because we're looking south, and the last 40 feet on the west side as your converting that to 2-hour parking except by permit from 8 a.m. to 2:30 a.m., which is the sort of typical 2-hour parking regulation around Somerville. So residents can still park here, but it does offer a little bit more flexibility for non-residents to park here as well. And that was what United Divers was looking for.
I was gonna say, Chair, you're on mute. I also started talking, I was on mute.
Oh, we're both muted.
Yeah.
You have your hand up?
I can tell you that you can't see it from here, but directly in front of the diving business is a fire hydrant. There's literally nowhere for their customers to park. So I think creating that space for them is ideal. The customers risk getting tagged or towed, safety concerns. So I'm for it. I think it's a good idea that they have someplace to park. That's all.
Great. Any further discussion? Hearing none, can I get a motion to accept or deny item number 6, please, A and B? Lieutenant Raimel,
Motion to accept.
can I get a second?
I second.
Wonderful. Can I get a roll call vote to accept item number 6, A and B?
Yes, Chair Lathan,
Yes.
Counselor Said,
Yes.
Lena Webb,
Yes.
Lieutenant Raimel,
Yes.
and that's 4 yes, and the motion carries.
Wonderful. Bless you, Lena. All right, moving on to item number 7. This is my understanding is a discussion and informational kind of item only. Is that correct? No need for a vote on item number 7?
Yes, this item is notification.
Notification. Okay, item number 7. Notification of addition of the following addresses to Schedule W locations prohibited in the insurance of parking permits. 13 Allen Street, 21 Allen Street, 71 Bow Street, 595 Broadway, 24 Mount Pleasant Street, 118 Prospect Street, 121 Prospect Street, 115 Thurston Street, and 13 Warwick Street. Who is here to discuss or provide notifications or understanding for this item? Can someone explain what Schedule W? Is that just the title of the section in the ordinance?
Sure,
Okay.
Chair. Through the chair, Schedule W is addresses that are restricted to not receive residential permits. So these are new units, new apartment buildings that are within a transit-oriented district. So these locations are not allowed to have permits unless they have filled out a waiver, and the waiver is available on the city website. But we want to advertise these so people can see them, and this is
Okay.
just for an advertisement, so people know that they can go to the Traffic Commission rules and regulations and see this. This is all, it's purely just for transparency.
Great. I love transparency. Thank you so much. Any other questions? Oh, Counselor Said and then Lieutenant Raimel?
ahead.
Thank you for.
Sorry.
Counselor, you're up.
Yeah, I'm unable to start my video for some reason because the host has stopped it, but I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, my question is, thank you for the explanation. Would it be possible to add the line about the waiver? Like, how will constituents know that it's an option to apply for waiver? And where
Through
to
the
find
chair,
it?
that is all in the Traffic Commission rules and regulations. All that information is there. This is
Okay.
just an addition to, we have a Schedule W now on the traffic rules and regulations. And there is a whole explanation on the traffic rules and regulations regarding this whole transit-oriented district.
Okay, thank you.
Lieutenant Raimel?
Oh, is that still up? I didn't know what a Schedule W was. That was my question, but I'm all set. Sorry.
Wonderful. Unless is there's any other questions or we're all good?
Yes,
All right.
that was the last item.
Wonderful. Can I get a motion to adjourn this wonderful meeting?
I'll make
I'll
a
make the motion.
All right.
To adjourn. I will
All right,
specify
to-
adjourn, because
And
I
can I-
could say to keep going, right?
To adjourn. Can I get a
Right.
second? All right. Lieutenant
I
Said,
second.
Wonderful. Can I get a roll call vote to adjourn this meeting?
Yes, Chair Lathan,
Yes.
Counselor Said,
Yes.
Lena Webb,
Yes.
Lieutenant Raimel,
Yes.
and that's 4 yes, and the motion to adjourn carries.
Ruby Tunes. Hope you guys have a wonderful, safe, long weekend and look forward to seeing you guys next month,
Yes.
next month.
Back at you.
All right. See you later.
Bye-bye.